Hello gang, hope this is finding you well. And I wanted to make sure that people had a chance to have a video review before they were asked to come in and take an exam. So you'll have all week to take this exam. You'll have Monday through Friday. It's just upon you to make sure that it's proctored somehow. If you have questions on how to do that, please email me. I would hope that people would contact the different campuses, either Alva, Woodward, Ponca City, Enid, possibly even OPSU if you're that far out, to find a way to come in person and sit down and take the exam. It will be computer based. People will not be allowed to use books. People will not be allowed to use outside tools. So that is one of the stipulations of the exam. So that's we have to have one of these. It's required of online courses. And I thought it would be best to get the midterm out of the way. That being said, I want to make sure people have an ample opportunity to review the correct information, the appropriate information, that stuff that's going to be valid for this exam. So I'm going to go over, and it's 35 questions. It will be worth 50 points. And I'm just going to kind of go through here and talk about each question. So be able to recognize symptoms of a substance use disorder. We spent some time talking about that. So make sure that you are very familiar with how to diagnose a substance use disorder. So as I'm looking here, there are at least 3, probably 4 or 5 questions related to diagnosis. So look over how to, get familiar with what criteria that is considered for substance use disorders, and you should do well on those questions. Be able to recognize the influence of adverse childhood experiences. So I do have a host of questions regarding ACEs. There are, let's see, specifically, well, that's a big topic, Taylor. What do I think about? So what are the effects of ACEs? What are the effects of adverse childhood experiences? What are the effects of ACEs on our clients? What impact should we be looking for? Also pay special attention to the slides. There are 2 particular slides. One is by Bernard in 1995. The other one is from Ann Maston in 2009. Bernard talks about resilience factors, internal resilience factors. So be thinking about what those 4 things are that inspire resilience, that help to develop resilience that a person has inside of them. Then Ann Maston talks about external factors that can help people that have gone through adverse experiences, and be able to recognize, at least, there are 11 of them. So be able to acquaint yourselves. They are listed in order of importance. So be able to acquaint yourselves with which ones are more important than others. That will help. Then there's another question about the impact of ACEs. Then we go into a little bit of information about neural circuitry and understanding the neural basis of addiction. So be familiar with what chemicals are involved and how they work. Pay attention to, when I discussed cocaine, amphetamine, those are typically the easiest substances to demonstrate what's happening in the brain. So if you can remember those slides, those details, you should do well on a couple of questions. There are 2 questions related to that. We discussed the addiction severity index, be able to recognize why you would use that. We spent a lot of time comparing and contrasting evidence-based practices versus traditional family therapy techniques or traditional family theories. So be able to discuss that distinction, and also think about, what do you prefer? What based upon what you know about them, what do you prefer, and be able to defend one way or another. So there'll be an essay question, and I'll want you to expand on that in some detail. So be able to think about which one you prefer and why. Let's see here. Traditional, yeah, so there's another question that has to do with traditional versus evidence-based practices. I shared some information from Bruce Wampold at the end of our conversation about evidence-based practices versus traditional family theory. Be able to recognize where Wampold and that research generally went. What is Wampold asking you to do after looking at all these evidence-based practices? What was fundamentally important? What common factors helped make evidence-based practices effective? Again, there's another question related to diagnosis. I'll give you a short vignette on diagnosing someone, so be able to recognize in a vignette what symptoms of substance use disorder are. Again, pay special attention to that. If you're going to be an LADC, you'll be diagnosing people, so we spend a little extra time talking about that. I think there are maybe even 6 total questions. Know the difference between intoxication and withdrawal. Also be familiar with the terminology homeostasis. About 3-4 questions regarding that. Actually, it looks like there are probably 4 or 5 questions that have to do with evidence-based practices now that I'm looking a little bit more. Okay, and so from last week, from this week that we're currently in, be thinking about, we're jumping into some theories, and the week before, so we started talking about some actual family theories. The ones that we're talking about this week are object permanence and Adlerian, and then we talked about Bowenian family therapy the week before. Be able to identify what researchers really are involved in attachment theory. Also, be able to recognize why a circular feedback loop, what that is and what would be important about that. Be able to recognize what is important about Bowen and a triangle. What is triangulation? Why would you use an I feel statement? Be able to recognize why you would use an I feel statement. Also, looking at fusion. Explain the difference between fusion and differentiation. If you are going to avoid triangulation in a relationship, what would you do? What would you do to avoid triangulation? Alfred Adler had some ideas about birth order. Be able to recognize those. Be able to recognize, maybe the difference between the oldest child, middle child, youngest child. Be able to look at and recognize what type of parents Adlerian therapists are trying to encourage. Is that authoritarian, authoritative? Think about that. Passive, permissive. Be able to recognize the 4 goals of misbehavior in children with Adlerian therapists. Go ahead and see if you can understand who the Freudians and psychoanalytic theorists are responsible for what traditional family therapy model. Your text uses a specific term for that. Be cautious and look in your book about Margaret Mailer. When an infant becomes fused and attached to the mother, what's the terminology for that? What does she refer to with an infant that is really attached to the mother? And so John Bowlby was a pioneer in what type of therapy. That should give you a good, I've gone through every question, that should give you a good starting place to begin studying. You're welcome to rewind the tape. Contact me if you have any questions. Thanks.